Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, January 9th, 2023. Time for another week of shows. How about that? And time for, I guess, the Republican Congress to kick off its business. And now that they have elected a speaker, you will have seen that by now, I am sure. Someone over the weekend told you that they went ahead and elected Kevin McCarthy as speaker, which is pretty much, It's what I expected, although I thought that perhaps the quickest route to it would have been if they could have convinced Democrats that he was the least worst option, or that they simply got fed up, bored, and waiting for the whole thing and just figured, well, he's eventually going to be elected speaker anyway, so we might as well absent ourselves. But neither of those two things came to pass. Instead, they actually did whittle down the Republican resistors until they got enough of them on board and took advantage of some advantageous Republican absences to lower the threshold of positive votes in favor of Kevin McCarthy to a low enough number, 216, that they could squeak by with that rather than wait for the 218 that they thought that they needed at the outset. But they did get to do it, and it is Kevin McCarthy. I didn't think there would really likely end up being any surprise speakers pulled from the wings anywhere. So, but I couldn't guarantee that was the case, but I did sort of think, all right, well, they're going to get around to McCarthy eventually. It's just a matter of how are they going to do it. And it was very difficult to imagine those holdouts joining in. But, like I said, some strategic absences helped nicely. I think, one of the members of the Republican conference, I think had a child born in that span of days and flew home to take care of business as most normal people would. That seems totally reasonable to me. I don't know what the other absence was about. I don't think anybody absented themselves for the purpose of lowering the threshold, but they weren't there. And when things are tight in the House, you're either there or you're not, and it's going to make a difference. Speaking of making a difference, I guess today is the day that they will get around to passing the rules package for the 208 or the 118th Congress, or the 218th Congress. Might as well do it 100 Congresses in the future, as if there would be a Congress at that point. Anyway, we can spend some time running through some or all of those rules, I guess. We'll summarize by saying I think we all know pretty much the shape of the compromises promised by McCarthy in order to get the votes that he needed to get across the finish line. It will also be interesting to see the dynamics and how they play out with respect to people who are still holdouts against McCarthy. So most of the biggest names in protest, if you want to call it that, eventually did come around and swallow their pride, supposedly, and vote for McCarthy in exchange for what? We'll find out. Not all of it is embodied in the rules package, but a lot of it is. A lot of the rules package is oddly specific, I think, this time too. But I haven't read through the rules package with a fine-tooth comb in a long time, but I don't recall usually all that often. I can't guarantee at all that it didn't happen in the past. I'm sure that it must have. I doubt very much that they invented this trick. It's not even much of a trick, but it was sort of ironic in that, of course, a lot of the screaming was about, well, we need to reform Congress. There are too many of these omnibus bills, too many bills loaded up with stuff that you never see because it's 1,000 pages and it should all be single purpose and we shouldn't have all this Christmas tree stuff hung on a vehicle that's passing. But the rules package itself is exactly that. It's exactly the kind of Christmas tree bill that they're ordinarily opposed to. And a lot of the special rules that they usually consider immediately prior to bringing a bill to the floor, the one with the rules of how you will debate it, how long will the debate go, what amendments are in order, et cetera, they just crammed right into the rules package. So the rules package makes in order the consideration of a number of their favorites, their legislative priorities, I guess. And I think that there were probably individual members or groups of members that demanded the inclusion of these things. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It's just cutting corners, and it's kind of funny that they take care of so much business in this one package. One of the items being you should only take care of one type of business in any one of these bills, and then they violate it right off the bat with the rules package. So, we could go over the language and you'll see exactly what sorts of things they're looking to bring forward. It's a roadmap to the first couple of days or maybe months. They might space this stuff out of what they're planning to do legislatively. But of course, what they're planning to do legislatively doesn't matter nearly as much, or for various reasons, so what they're planning to do rules-wise inside the House. Legislatively, of course, they still face a Democratic Senate and, of course, a Democratic president who can ultimately veto the most egregious Republican legislation that manages to get by, and, of course, with the narrowest kind of majority in the House, very little chance that they would be able to override the veto. Not even, it's a non-starter in the Senate for the most part. But the rules is, of course, where it's at. Not that saved me from having pushback from people on Mastodon now rather than Twitter, who I don't know exactly what they're up to, but they got me rolling my eyes, saying, "Oh, none of this will pass a veto, and you're just trying to stir the pot." And not really. It's kind of stirred. We had like 15 votes worth of stirring the pot, and no, I'm talking about the rules. And then the feedback was, well, stuff like rules, that doesn't matter. Well, that crap won't fly on this show. Damn it. So we won't bother talking about that anymore. We got Greg Dworkin here talking about things that do matter. You settled into your space. You got your stories. You raft together today, Greg. How are you?
Hi, all set. And of course we're going to talk about rules.
Oh my God, that stuff doesn't matter. You pundit types are always trying to. I'm fear-mongering.
Well, here's the thing.
Now,
okay, so
yes,
with this Republican minority,
this one
now becoming the majority in the House,
yes,
they can't pass anything bad because the Senate and the president, but they can prevent a bunch of stuff passing that's good.
That is true.
So that's the entire game here. It's to prevent the debt ceiling being raised and taking it hostage. That's the only thing they have, but it's like a big thing.
Yes.
So,
but they apparently they don't believe this.
They only have one move, but it's an incredible move.
Yeah. Right. And that doesn't even really get to the rules part of it, which is, more esoteric. But that's exactly the point, is that there are things that have to happen in order for us to all, more or less survive as a country. And they can't happen unless we do dumb stuff in return. And by the way, some of that will be hostage type legislation where ordinarily we would veto it and defeat it, but it's a question of, will we swallow it in order to keep the government functioning or keep the worldwide economy from collapsing? Gosh, I hope not, but
well, it's pretty amazing stuff. So we'll get to that. We won't go as deeply into it as we did on Thursday, and I'm glad we did it on Thursday so we don't have to do it today. And that show's still available in the archives for those of you who want to listen. You can start at 1346, and David and I are talking about rules, which is to say I'm asking questions and he's giving you answers. But I thought it was pretty helpful because now I'm looking at today. And, one of the funny things, of course, is one of the things they avoided with this 15-vote speaker thing is, had it gone smoothly, which it didn't, then they immediately would have done the rules package.
Yes,
which they didn't.
That's right. They would have done that.
And had they done that, the rules package says something like you need 72 hours before you pass anything. So we're going to pass it immediately.
Yes.
But they didn't because they couldn't. So now they avoid that.
Yeah, that's true. That does give them a break. They were all set to consider a rules package they had just finished writing. Yeah, and so instead they violated another way, but okay.
Well, they didn't violate it.
Not the 72 rule. The other rules of, we're only going to have single-purpose legislation from here on. You're not.
So, a couple of things about that.
Not just this one.
Sarah Binder points out, beware promises of House open rules.
Yeah.
Majorities of both parties promise to pare back restrictive rules which limit offering of amendments, but both parties eventually renege. How to manage a fractious majority and pesky minority, restrict rank and file amendments on the floor, and then she puts a chart showing that every time they try to undo the restrictions within 3 to 4 sessions, they go right back and restrict them. It's like earmarks. Earmarks are terrible. We have to get rid of them. But now we can't manage the floor because without earmarks, you can't twist anybody's arm. So leadership can't do squat. So we better put them back. That happens over and over and over and over. But even more over and over. Every 6 years, every 6 sessions, I should say, every 12 years, you restrict the leadership's ability to control amendments. It doesn't work, and then you put them back. So it's like clockwork. She's got a really good chart on this, and it doesn't matter whether it's Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you say you want open rules, and everybody kind of wants to say they're for openness, obviously. Even Republicans still say they're for openness, and they see the value in it. And then what happens is, the other side says, oh, you'll allow us to vote on anything, eh? Well, and you bring a couple amendments, and then the other side gets uncomfortable with those amendments, or even if they don't, they say it now is taking us 10 days to pass something we should have been finished with, hours ago, days ago.
Yes, and so what does that mean from a practical point of view for non-experts like myself? If you go back to the simple stuff, I'm just a bill and this is how I pass, which of the chambers filibusters and which doesn't?
Right. They say it's the Senate.
But if you are allowed any amendment by 435 members, that's a filibuster.
It certainly, it amounts to very much the same thing, and you can't get routine business done because it only works if all 435 members are interested in finishing the business, for one thing, and usually about half of them are opposed to the business. And after that, then people have to agree to stick to the subject, and they don't always agree to do that. And there are always going to be, 10 members who will say, I don't care what we're legislating on, I'm putting an abortion ban amendment on the floor. And it takes time to get rid of that stupid thing.
Now, again, if you're the Republicans trying to pass stuff, then that's bad for you, but you're doing it anyway. But if you're a Republican trying to make sure that stuff doesn't get done, then it's really useful to you. So the dynamics of this are really bizarre.
Yes, that's
like
true.
Who wants it and who doesn't want it?
Right. Ordinarily, at this point, Republicans would say they want openness, and it would be Democrats ruining the party by bringing non-germane and annoying amendments, except that 3/4 of the Republican conference will also be doing that.
Yeah, so it's really weird. And again, some other things that go back to, because I was on the show last Thursday, so Friday was the weird stuff about like who's going to be speaker. So stuff happened since I was on the show last.
We got
one thing is, one of the very, very first pieces of businesses today, even before they get to the rules package, is selecting chairs for the committees. So today the House Republican Steering Committee, that's what it's called, will meet and select the chairs of House committees. Going to reporter Craig Kaplan from C-SPAN. He's one of the producers there.
I'll do it.
And so there's going to be the Democrats have already decided, as you pointed out last week, but the Republicans still have to decide. So they have to do that today. And one of the interesting things is that there is a Republican who was on the steering committee who just resigned. His name is Mike Rogers, and he's stepping down from serving on the House GOP steering committee after nearly strangling Matt Gaetz.
He should have, I don't know which way, he should have done it in the reverse order, or he should have strangled Matt Gaetz and not resigned.
Now, if one thing has something to do with the other, it's not clear, because now that there's a speaker, the speaker controls the cameras and all the information, so like we don't find out anything anymore. But, you got to wonder if it's related.
It could be. I mean, you're not supposed to assault one another. As annoying as Matt Gaetz is, it's still probably against the rules to strangle him.
Right. And since we're talking about the fact that the only thing that the Republicans can really accomplish is blocking stuff, there's an interesting discussion to be had, and I'd love your opinion on this.
I think you should be had.
Well, we've all been had. About why we still have to deal with the debt ceiling.
Oh.
In other words, the Democrats could have gotten rid of this, but they didn't. And why is that? And no, it's not because of Senate Manchin. Because when it comes to financial stuff, Senate Manchin will do a temporary carve out for filibustering type stuff. That's not why.
Sometimes, yeah.
They didn't do it for voting rights, but they were perfectly happy to do it when it came to financial stuff. So, what's the deal with that? Well, according to of all people, Chris Cillizza, back then, when he still had a job.
Absolutely. What was he's just muttering in the corner now? You heard this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what he said is, look, the Democrats are in a weird position because let me explain it this way, not Cillizza's way.
All right.
Imagine you have a very painful and difficult divorce situation that just happened.
All right.
Okay? And you get your credit card.
Uh-huh.
And your credit card has huge bills on it and it was rung up by your now ex.
Yeah, all right. I've heard of such things.
Okay. So, do you pay it?
When's it due?
Now.
Oh, damn. You don't want to. I'll dispute the charges. But generally speaking, you reach the end of the rope and it's like, well, let
me pay this and I'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
In many ways, shapes, and forms.
Kind of have to, and then right.
So, because it's my credit rating and I can't put that at risk, and no matter how I feel about it, I don't want to pay these bills, but I sort of have to.
Yes, okay, I get what you mean.
And what I'm paying for is not permission to buy new stuff. I'm paying for stuff that's already been bought.
Yeah.
That's the debt ceiling.
That's true. Although the credit rating thing throws a... All right. But anyway, I see what
you mean.
No, it doesn't.
It's the same thing. It's the credit rating. It's the debt ceiling, okay?
No, well, I mean,
if I raise the debt
ceiling,
I'm essentially having a debate with myself as to whether or not I'm going to pay this bill.
Yes.
Which has already been rung up, and the Democrats are in the situation where it was rung up by Trump.
Yeah.
So if I raise the debt ceiling, I'm essentially acceding to the fact that because of the stupid tax cuts that were ridiculous and I don't support, these bills have been rung up, and if I pay for them now, I'm tacitly supporting the concept that they were legitimate. But if I don't pay for them, then credit rating is destroyed.
Right.
So
with your permission, but okay.
So you sort of do it. Now, if I fix it by raising the debt limit, making the situation go away, I know for a fact that the Republicans are going to make this into campaign commercials.
Yes.
And job number one for every representative in the House, bar none, doesn't matter what party, is getting reelected.
Right.
And if you think job number two is doing things that are good for the country, it runs way behind job number one. Mm-hmm. So if you think that raising the debt ceiling is automatically going to put a target on your back because Republicans are already making those campaign commercials, then you have to get something for the trouble of raising the debt ceiling. And if you think that raising the debt ceiling is going to help the country is sufficient to counteract the campaign commercials,
no,
you'll never understand why it never passed.
You'll never have a chance to because you'll be gone.
You'll be gone. So, the Democrats could raise it, but if they do that, they know they're going to be attacked by the Republicans. And what do they get out of it? The only thing they get out of it is they say it was okay for Trump to have done that because, see, we validated it. And so that's really going to help me run. No, it's not. So maybe I won't do it. I'll do it if I can get some Republican support, some cover.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do it if I have to do it by myself. So every time it comes up in Congress, you have this dynamic, and it doesn't matter what year, what situation, and they don't do it. And so then what happens is, okay, then the bill comes due. All right, so now the election's over, and there's a next election, and so they're still concerned about it. But now the election's over, and now they didn't do it, and now the Republicans are going to ruin the country, and the Democrats will complain that Republicans are not doing what they need to do because they always ought to put country first. They themselves don't.
I
guess nobody does.
Yeah. I guess that's
job number one for everybody, no matter what party, is getting yourself reelected. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. And I mean, there's all sorts of interesting nuance to it. Like, for instance, the people who ran up the bill are the ones who should have to raise the debt ceiling. Except that,
but
in many cases, the ones who ran up the bill are crazy and either don't care or don't want to or just don't. I suspect some of the Republicans might actually harbor some kooky ideas about, well, I just don't think it will collapse the world economy. I think that
there's a few Rand Pauls in there, but for the most part, it's an asymmetric discussion.
Right,
I care that the faith and the reputation of the United States is on the line, and I want to preserve that. And you think it either doesn't matter or you don't care, or what you're really interested in is using it to hold something hostage so that you can cut social spending.
Yeah. Or you're one of those people who just think, that's just one of those rules. They don't matter. People don't care about rules. You're just trying to stir the pot. All right. Well, there's certain things that happen.
That's partly why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah. I think that's largely true. It was always very difficult to move. It's always very difficult to move the Senate to do anything. Especially when it comes to anything that has to do with finances, right? They're very skittish about things like that, and who wants to be it's like you say, it's for the good of the country. The best interest of the country would be to say, enough with this debt ceiling garbage. We don't need it. It's not like a requirement of our Constitution or anything. It's something we set up a long time ago in a very different era as a check on something that no longer exists. But the headline will be, Democrat Smith votes to eliminate debt ceiling. And the Republicans comment, this is because he's for wild, uncontrolled spending. And we know that's bad, even though I do more of it than he does.
Right. So the debt ceiling really is the thing that Congress is going to do in this next 2 years, and everything else is sort of secondary. The House doesn't have, judgeship appointments, and in that sense, the Senate can do a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with legislation. The House is all about legislation. Oh, yeah, they can do investigations, sure.
Oh, that's what they'll be doing, yes.
And they can feed the programming producers for Fox News. And that's essentially what they'll be spending 2 years doing. And then, in addition, they'll sprinkle in a bunch of things that they won't do, which is, the good of the country. So that's what to expect.
Okay, I will expect it.
And it's no fun. So, how do you get there? Well, again, first you have to do this rules package that comes after you pick the committee. So that'll be sometime tonight. And will the rules package pass? Now, in a functional House, what would happen is that all the concessions that Kevin McCarthy made in order to get the nutcases, and again, they didn't vote for him. Six of them, six hardliners, voted present, lowering the threshold. They never did vote for him. He never got a majority of votes. He is the speaker. Those are the rules.
Yeah, well, okay. We knew that.
We knew that.
We'll live
but, the point is they never actually voted for him. And so those hardliners haven't really compromised with McCarthy to the point that you think they will do anything. But having done all of that, having McCarthy give whatever he gave the House away in order to get those presents. He didn't get votes out of them. He got presents, and that was enough. So having done all of that, now you'd think in a functional House, the so-called moderates, anybody who's not a House Freedom Caucus person, would look at this and say, well, I don't like what you've done. And there's probably some of that. There's at least one representative, Tony Gonzalez, has already said, I'm not voting for the rules package. I don't like it.
Yeah. Mike Rogers doesn't
You think
like
there were
it.
50, but there may be 3. You don't know.
Right.
Nancy Mace said, I don't like it because, and again, this is the thing to watch for today, between today and tonight. Who makes noise about, I don't like this because you're cutting the defense budget? And I say that because cutting the defense budget is a safe space for Republicans. It's one they can always retreat to.
They can say, you can't attack me for being upset about cutting the defense budget. And if you do, the people who would attack me for it are peaceniks and losers and communists.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, That's a safe space to do it from. And then there's, of course, I don't like it, but, which it's very
there can be
difficult
other
to vote
reasons you
against
don't.
the
I don't
rules
like it
package.
because you gave my committee chair to somebody else. But you
The guy I
can't
wanted to
say
kill.
that. So you're going to say, I don't like it because,
Right.
of the
Space
defense
Force.
budget.
Right. Not enough Space Force money.
Well, it's the House Steering Committee that made you not chair. You can't blame me. Yeah, I can blame you, and I can't do it directly, and I can't even tell people why I'm mad, but I can't vote against your damn rules package.
Yeah. But not very many of them can because they won't be able to go forward. Yeah, just if you don't have a rules package in place, there's very little that you can accomplish. It's even harder to get things through. Well,
you're going to have a rule package eventually. The point is, do you make him change it? After all, under the rules to come that are going to be voted on tonight, just takes one person to,
Oh, right, to propose this thing. Although, yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about that, and it's not quite, well, I mean, it's worse for the speaker because the speaker is the target of things. But in terms of wasting time, which is what it comes down to, yeah, they can already waste the time. You saw Murdery Trader Green spend half of her first term in Congress moving to adjourn, and everybody's saying, no, let's have a vote on whether we want to do it. You're the only one who wants to adjourn. You and the six lunatics that created all these problems last week. But now, yeah, holding the threat against the speaker, he gets upset about that. He doesn't like that happening. He's the target of it. But it's all going to be just a waste of time. But yeah, so he had to concede that. There's much more, even more annoying and oddly specific in some cases, demands that are built into the rules package. It's a very weird looking one.
Yeah,
Maybe
we'll see what happens today,
Yeah.
and then we'll move on. After the break, we'll talk about other things.
Okay, and keeping an eye on it, I think it started the music a little late, so we'll stop talking a little early to make up for it. How about that?
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Good call there, by the way. Great professionals, taking your cues from the music. This solves a lot of engineering problems later. We were having our usual chat during the breaks, and then we said, all right, now if we just chat our way in, people will have to be introduced to all the discussion we had before, and it'll be out of our control. But being a rules-based body, we said we'll just enter in silence, and then we can take any direction we want rather than have to explain ourselves
Not complete
later.
Silence. You could have said nothing, and nobody
Right.
would have known.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, well, that's openness for you. Well, maybe it's
we
overrated.
are totally transparent, and do not try this at home.
Dang. All right. Well, anyway, you caught us. But we get to still choose
we always talk
topic, so that's good. What were we talking about? What did we want to talk about rather than what we were going to accidentally talk about?
Well, one of the things that's going on that I wish I had more information and convey stuff, but like all of you listening know at least as much about it as I do and even more, is the fact that there was this attempted coup in Brazil that failed.
Yes. And
so,
we do have to catch up on that
taking
somehow.
a page from the January 6th playbook, they did it exactly the same way. They claimed the election was stolen, and then they attacked the Congress.
Yeah.
Broke a bunch of windows, but there were some major differences. Difference number one is the people at the top in Brazil had already been installed.
Yes. That's
So they weren't
just, They
there.
were just they're being angry, breaking windows about the people who are in
And
power.
because they were already installed, they had their fingers on the levers of power, so to speak, so they could rev up enough police or law enforcement or, law enforcement officials, LEOs, various and sundry, to go and arrest everybody who did this.
Yes.
You couldn't do
That's one of
that
the
on
major
January
differences.
6th. Biden hadn't yet been installed. You didn't have him with his finger on levers of power. He couldn't tell the National Guard to go fix things.
Right.
And you had somebody who was at the top still, which was Trump, because Biden hadn't replaced him yet, egging on the crowd. Bolsonaro was not egging on the crowd. He was looking for eggs in a supermarket in Florida somewhere.
This is strangely enough. And so here the very difference between, as you pointed out the whole time, the auto golpe and the actual coup. This would be an actual coup, whereas ours was supposedly auto golpe.
So major differences. So you can't just say, well,
Certainly.
why didn't we arrest everybody like they did?
Yeah.
Well, because they were trying to, and they were getting, the crap beat out of them by hard numbers. That is to say, being outnumbered. Mm-hmm. So without the National Guard, which was, in my opinion, probably suppressed by the Trumpists and, preventing people from going there and fixing things. I don't think it was an intelligence failure. I think it was a failure to act by people who knew exactly what was going on.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
I believe your opinion.
But if that's the case, it's different than what happened in Brazil.
Yeah, it is. It's different in kind. Though there was, it was interesting news to see the headline that apparently the legal system there reacted much quicker, and I believe so. I think one of the governing officials of Brasilia, the capital, was arrested on the theory, and I don't know how Brazilian law works, but on the theory that this could not have happened without his
you let
assent.
this happen.
Yeah. So
also, folks in that part of the world are a little bit more familiar with coups and such.
That's true, and I could imagine that they say, "Yeah, we've seen this before. We don't want to put up with this again." Whereas for us, it's a curiosity and a novelty.
Yeah, that can't happen here. That's
right.
So there's that. And speaking of internationalism here, Clive Crook has a really interesting piece in Bloomberg today. I put it in the Pundit Roundup, and I put it with a gift subscription, so hopefully y'all can get behind the paywall and read it. And it's entitled, American and British Conservatives Are Frozen in Failure. Both Republicans and Tories are finding the revolutions of 2016 difficult to reverse. That is to say, what's happening is that the 2016 people, who were in charge, Trump and Boris Johnson, failed. Brexit failed.
Yeah, right.
Trumpism failed. And so how do you move on from that? And conservatives need to, and they can't, because it's the conservatives who are finding it difficult to move past those folks.
Right.
With Trump, it's because the ongoing threat to democracy is ongoing. And with Johnson, it's because, for a number of reasons, the UK is trying to put an election off because they know they're going to get clobbered, because they know they failed, but they can't get themselves to admit that they failed. And their failure particularly is Brexit, but obviously it comes in the form of higher prices, a shrinking country, decreased manufacturing, strikes. Everything's going wrong there. And a lot of it is all tied up with Brexit, and the conservatives can't get themselves to admit that they did it. They know they lied to everybody about what was going to happen. They sort of knew this was going to happen. It's happening, and they can't figure out how to blame somebody else, which is a typical politician move.
Yes. Well, they're always looking for that. Okay. Not yet ready over at Bloomberg to move off of calling people who do stuff like that conservative. But we may have been premature in wondering whether the New York Times was really going to do that anyway. They just had that one fun, amazing instance of it so far.
Yeah, which was pulled back. So for the past few years, he writes, the U.S. and U.K. followed strikingly similar political trajectories. Against all odds, populist uprising captured both countries' conservative parties, secured power, and embarked on projects of national transformation. These efforts went badly, to put it generously, and in due course, support for the rebellions subsided. Lately, voters have been calling for a rethink, and in both countries, this is proving harder than you'd suppose. In 2020, after 4 years of making America great by setting people at each other's throats, Trump lost to Joe Biden, not the most formidable opponent.
Well,
in the recent midterm election, Trump's interventions crippled the Republican Party. The UK, meanwhile, has gone from one calamity, Boris Johnson, to the next, Liz Truss. Its economy is now setting records for poor performance, and support for the Tories' historic project has collapsed. But conservatives in both countries are finding the revolutions of 2016 difficult to reverse. Trump's now such a liability that Democrats have to be longing to see him nominated. Republicans who are acquainted with the same polling data aren't certain to ditch him. And in the same way, Britain's Tories know that Brexit's failed and they must mitigate the damage, but they can't bring themselves to say it. Everything's going to plan, they insist. The problem isn't just that it's hard to own your mistakes. When a political party sees it needs a new direction, change of leadership is often enough. Usually no need for explicit apologies. And shifts of direction don't always have to be dramatic. Usually what happens is you go the other way and then claim you were always going that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Or going...
imagine a parade and the politician runs out to be in the front. And then the parade suddenly turns in the other direction. What's the politician going to do? Run to the other end and try to get out in front. I mean, that's what they do. Right? There's no need for Republicans to renounce the platform because they don't have one. The electorate mainly just wants to move on from Trump's exhausting provocations, ignorance, vanity, and impropriety. But the Tories are in a tougher spot. Unfortunately, they do have policies. And if the UK's prospects are to improve, they have to change. But Brexit can't be undone. And even in the unlikely event that Britain has to rejoin the EU for the foreseeable future, the Union won't want them back.
Could be.
So now you have to have economic integration as a non-member, like Switzerland, Norway. But that means acting as a supplicant, and the Tories wouldn't be able to disguise it, and the EU is unlikely to help them out.
Yes.
So, Rishi Sunak, the new PM, is doing less strutting and more practical wheeling and dealing. But, it's not going to change the fact that everybody's going to associate what's happening with Britain with the Tories because it is their policy that put them there.
Well, I don't see how you could associate it with anybody else.
So Republican Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, soon to be president of the University of Florida.
Is that right? Oh, I forgot about that.
Because he'll accede to whatever the governor there wants to do. Gave his farewell address last week. The most important divide in America, he said, is not about policy or red versus blue. It's pluralist versus political zealot.
It's not. Bye.
That's true, and not just the U.S. Zealots have energy. Energy drives politics, and the results speak for themselves. That's his opinion.
Well, Clive thinks so.
Clive
I think that maybe there are some other issues, and I think policy is an important thing, and I guess Ben Sasse doesn't, and that's why he's not a senator anymore.
Maybe Ben Sasse isn't, the best judge of all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, Ben Sasse thinks whatever, that the thing that's most important is whatever he's moving on to next. That's the important thing. I used to do policy, but now that I'm leaving policy's not important, it's something else, and I don't even know how he's going to address that as a supplicant to, what's his name? DeSantis. So he's going to be, Igor to DeSantis's Dr. Frankenstein. Terrific.
Right. Meanwhile, in the New York Times, historian Joanne Freeman has an interesting piece here. It's tempting to laugh at McCarthy's struggles, but history shows this type of chaos is no joke.
All right.
And the picture illustrating this,
we don't
not sure what it is.
Oh,
it's a picture of Statuary Hall, maybe.
Yes, with
with a guard, just sort of watching the proceedings.
Yeah,
of what
Capitol
might be
Hill police officer. Yeah, looking at the camera, the monitor in there. I don't know. It's just, I guess, a dramatic black and white photo with shadows and contrast.
Yeah.
And a
anyway.
cop.
What she writes, this is far from the first time the House was mired in a stalemate over speakership. It's the 15th such battle in Congress's history, and the 9th time
in history.
that electing a speaker required more than 3 ballots. But each of those times, the struggle was a litmus test of the state of party politics and the state of the nation. Our recent contest was much the same, exposing party fractures, irreconcilable differences, but unlike previous battles, it lacked policy and legislation-bound core. More than anything, it was about power. a gap that reveals much about the state of the nation. Now, that's a good excuse for me to stick something else in here. As I understand it, you can correct me because I usually don't understand these things. It's about the Rules Committee itself.
All right.
The Rules Committee itself, as previously set up, and you had said this, that it's always set up so that the majority has way more than the minority, so there's no screwing up of what the majority wants to do.
Yeah.
So the last committee had nine Democrats and 4 Republicans.
All right.
And that way, whatever the Republicans want doesn't matter. That's the point.
Right.
That's why the Rules Committee, known as the Speaker's Committee, gets to set the legislation that goes to the floor and what the rules are for discussing it. So now it flips. And if they do the same thing and it's 9-4, then the Republicans have the majority and they get to do whatever they want with the Rules Committee. But Kevin McCarthy, in giving away the House in order to get the speakership, apparently allowed 3 of those 9 seats to go to the House Freedom Caucus.
Aha.
So now the committee split 6-3-4. There's 6 McCarthy loyalists, 3 House Freedom Caucus, and 4 Democrats. What's the point?
Yeah.
The point is McCarthy has 6 votes, and I don't like McCarthy has 7. Now, that doesn't mean that the Democrats and the House Freedom Caucus will ever agree on anything.
No.
The point is that McCarthy doesn't have an automatic, whatever you do, I have more votes than you. That's what he gave away.
Yeah. Oh, that could be something.
It could be something, it could be nothing, but it's just unheard of.
Yeah. It's usually just, I don't know, it's not done.
Because you had explained
sorry.
on Thursday, the whole point is that you stack it so that this can't come close to being a problem.
Yeah.
Well, it's a problem.
All right. Well, we'll see. And it may make very little, maybe, substantive difference because it'll only come up when McCarthy and his lieutenants say they want to put their foot down and stop the House Freedom Caucus from making crazy demands or attaching lunatic
like
stuff.
tanking the world economy.
Right. And they may not care to do that, so, it might not come up. But if they ever did decide to do it, in other words, it institutionalizes the uprising, the Republican uprising and the revolution that they've fomented against their leadership.
Right. I mean, in theory,
and
McCarthy wins every vote 10-3.
Yeah.
Because he's got his 6 plus the Democrats, and the Republicans have 3 votes, and they're nuts. So they say no to whatever McCarthy wants to do. In theory. In practice, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll mostly be, well, what we'll do is, in order to not expose this fissure, we'll only bring forward rules that please the House Freedom Caucus, and then no one will see that there's a split between our 9. And so, for the sake of keeping up appearances and getting a 9-4 vote on all the rules, it's because all the rules will be written in the House Freedom Caucus,
right.
and nowhere else.
And so that's bad.
Yes,
that's why, when people like Nancy Mace or Tony Gonzalez says, I don't like this, it may or may not matter, depending upon what the story is. In any case, going back to history here, the 1855-1856 speakership contest was like the present one. It was a product of fractured party politics. Finding one candidate who satisfied the many voting blocks was near impossible. And on the unyielding question of slavery compromise, it was difficult if not impossible. So Congress's opening day presaged the months to come. On the first ballot, 21 different congressmen received votes for speaker, 84 ballots in December alone. In desperation, in early January, Felix Zollicoffer of the American Party,
sure,
even though there was an American Party, proposed a bill requiring 3 main candidates publicly state their views of Congress's recent legislation on slavery's expansion to the West. The bill passed, and there was a congressional slavery inquisition of sorts, but voting went on another 3 weeks. And when the New York Tribune editor Horace Greeley denounced Albert Rust, a Democrat of Arkansas, for trying to disqualify Republican Speaker candidate Nathaniel Banks, Rust responded with his fist, punching Greeley in the head, and then hitting him with his cane near the National Hotel a short while later.
Well,
so caning happened not just on the floor.
Right. And then, what were all these people so dependent on canes for? We don't know, but they loved to hit people with them, and that was the main reason they carried them.
Yeah. Ultimately, the stalemate seemed so unbreakable that the House lowered the threshold for victory from majority to a plurality for only the second time in its history. And in the end, Nathaniel Banks squeaked through a victory, a major accomplishment for a coalescing party and an anti-slavery party at that. Southerners had held the majority speakerships, a product of their longtime hold on the national government, so this was both noteworthy and a sign of struggles to come.
Yes.
So, what happens in that first speaker vote can certainly tell you a lot about what's going to happen in the next 2 years. And she goes over some other things here. But the point is, it's tempting to laugh, she writes, at the strut and fret that took place in the House, much of it seemingly signifying nothing, but it was not just theatrics, and it wasn't a joke. It's a symptom of a dysfunctional party that's questionably anchored in a democratic politic and a glaringly obvious sign of things to come. Given Mike Rogers' near lunge at Matt Gaetz on Friday night, it's an eerie echo of things past.
He needed a cane.
Yeah. If he had a cane, there would have been damage. The House has elected a speaker, but that won't put an end to the internecine Republican battles. They'll continue entangling Congress and stymieing national politics. Politics is a team sport that requires captains. Congressional politics also requires captions, otherwise you won't understand what's going on.
Right.
Even more so, today's congressional Republicans are not a team. They have no captain. They've displayed their failings for all the world to see. In effect, we're witnessing the rupture of the Republican Party, the ultimate outcome of Republicans' continuing failure to stand up to the extremism in their ranks and choosing to remain silent in the face of the right-wing politics of destruction. They've essentially endorsed it. Their silence in the face of Donald Trump's lies and his election loss. And by the way, I would add the Brazilian coup that they won't comment on.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Laying the groundwork for the upheaval we're watching now. That upheaval reflects the state of our nation, but it's shaping the nation as well. It's encouraging to think there are moderate Republicans who don't support this brand of politics, and there are certainly many of them. But until they organize themselves and oppose their in-house opposition, that's what we were talking about in the first segment, how they could. They haven't, they won't, but they could. They're pushing the nation ever closer to a dangerous edge and defining the Republican Party in the process. Now, if there's any good news to be seen out of this, it's the 2022 election. There was no red wave. The reason there was no red wave is because the Republicans were seen as extremists. So even though there were more Republicans voting than Democrats, overall, when you add them up in every state, the Republicans barely eked out a House victory. And that's because they were seen as extremists. There's nothing about what's going on in the House right now, my point is, that's going to help them look less extreme. If anything, it's locked in now. And you can't help but pay attention. It's like everywhere. Even if you didn't want to pay attention about politics, you can't get away from it. It's like everywhere.
Well, that would be great if it coalesces as the emerging descriptor of the Republican Party is that they're extremists in the same way that they succeeded in making it tax and spend liberals be the definition of Democrats.
Well, let me just give you some headlines I have in the pundit roundup today.
Oh, all right.
John Cassidy, The New Yorker, Kevin McCarthy's hollow victory will have economic and political consequences. If the new House Speaker is to get anything done, he'll need to retain the support of far-right extremists.
Okay, there's
Will Bunch, a new House Speaker with 49% or 216 votes, heading the U.S. minority party, beholden to 20 most extreme members, is a disaster for democracy. How minority rule could implode U.S. democracy in 2023.
That's a lot of words.
Jim Tankersley in the New York Times, speaker drama raises new fears on debt limit. We've talked about that. Rick Perlstein, New York Magazine, the long authoritarian history of the Capitol riot. There's a whole bunch of stuff I left out of here about both January 6th and the speaker's vote. They're being tied together.
Oh, yeah.
That's as it should be. So, if you just look at the newspapers, you're going to see bunches of pieces about extremism on the side of the Republicans. Interestingly, David Byler, who's a data guy, sort of a center-right data guy. I mean, I know him, so I can honestly vouch for that he's center-right. But, he tries to be neutral because he's at the Washington Post. And he writes, Joe Biden is gaining ground, but Democrats want someone else in 2024. And that's true. I mean, if the Democrats they'll be happy with Biden. Don't get me wrong. They'll all vote for Biden. He's not at risk for being primaried. If he runs, he'll be the nominee.
Else?
And if he's a nominee, Democrats will vote for him.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take Captain America if he's running.
Sure. But Yeah, and Captain America sort of center-right when you get down to it.
That's right. Even Biden would vote for him.
Not as center-right as Tony Stark, but, still pretty center-right.
Okay. Yeah,
right,
they would have a battle.
Because Tony Stark is Elon Musk, if Elon Musk were smart.
If he could make things.
Yeah. But in any case,
Iron Man suit blows
the
up.
fact of the matter is the Republicans are going to wind up being presented that way. There were a number of pieces in the New York Times which talked about the fact that what has happened with the speaker vote and January 6th basically is painting them as looking a lot more extreme to their detriment, and that's really what this comes down to.
Well, that's good. I woke up to the radio headline, if you can call it a headline, of it's interesting. The Republicans trying very hard, you would have guessed they would. I mean, this is the only thing you can do is to try to recover from this. And they're taking an interesting tack on it and saying, well, we don't apologize for all that drama on the floor. We're ready to get to work, but, we don't apologize for the drama. But the drama didn't do anything in particular. What needs apologizing for is all of the concessions that you made and the things that you're going to do that helped you paper over the fact that the drama wouldn't allow you to elect a speaker. Now you have a speaker. The part you need to apologize for begins now.
Yes, what you need to apologize for is for everything that happens from this point onward.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me that you embarrassed yourselves. Who cares about that? I mean, it's what you're doing to the rest of us that's problematic. So, yeah. Well, that is interesting. And, also from the previous piece about the history of these things and the fact that there have been multiple ballots in the past, and just thinking about comparing these other speakers' battles. The battle is over many things, but centers on what are we going to do about something as central to our identity as slavery. This is a huge, huge issue. So, you're going to have 100 votes for speaker because some people are there saying, you should be able to continue to own human beings and we should expand
Let's compromise on that.
Yeah, right. So obviously you're going to have problems. But 15 ballots on, I want a special investigation of the guy who gave me a ticket in Omaha. That's not really.
Or I want to be on the rules committee, even better.
Yeah. Well, that's the more, the more salient point. But there's a lot of this stuff that's tucked in there is I want to vote on my special bill and I'm not going to vote for you for speaker unless you say in the House rules that I'm allowed to have the vote on my bill. And I don't think they've done that very frequently in the past. Maybe, I can't say it's never been done, but there's a whole list of individual pieces of legislation that are packaged into the rules package that they're going to vote on today that guarantee, that this vote will now be in order. And that's literally just members saying, I'll only vote for you if you do me a favor. Everybody Ukrained, every Republican, did the Zelensky phone call for the rules package with Kevin McCarthy, and McCarthy gave them everything they asked for.
Right. So speaking of Zelensky and Ukraine, in the last couple of minutes, let's talk about that.
Okay.
There's a really interesting piece in a journal called LSE from the UK, and it's by Pierre Harouche, and it's called Whose Backyard? Realism and the Shifting Balance of Stakes in Ukraine. And the basic theme here is that people have talked about balance of power. You can look at it in a Kissinger, Metternich sort of, Game of Thrones kind of way. And realpolitik or realist framework is it's all about balance of power. And the author points out that doesn't really work for a couple of reasons. As Kenneth Waltz puts it, he writes, the balance of power theory helps us understand the pressure states are subject to, but it doesn't tell you why state X made a certain move last Tuesday. You'd have to get into the weeds like we do with the Republicans in the House to really understand that. Balance of power theory would help you understand why the Republicans are having difficulties coming together on voting for somebody, but they wouldn't tell you why this particular person, Matt Gaetz, didn't vote for Kevin McCarthy specifically. So you need to get into the details to do that. But more importantly, he writes, you have to start thinking about it as a balance of power. And you have to start thinking about it in terms of a balance of stakes. Who has a stake in this? Not Trump stakes, but who has a stake in this? What's important? And he writes, for example, whose backyard is Ukraine really? In summary, a victorious Russia would gain a ruinous colony, but a victorious West would gain a precious ally. So in the battle for Ukraine, Russia has less to gain because of their moves, and the West has more and more to gain because of their moves. And that's why, for example, all of a sudden, everybody's willing, including NATO, to give Ukraine tanks. Well, isn't that escalatory? Well, it was if you thought Ukraine wasn't that important to you. But as Ukraine becomes more and more and more important, as you see Ukraine winning, and as you realize that Russia has almost nothing to gain from winning in Ukraine at this point, other than Putin's survival, then sure. If we get more out of it and they get less out of it, maybe it's time to change the dynamics and start sending them tanks and anything else they ask for.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. And certainly at the outset, it might have been more provocative. Everyone would have said, what do you say? You're sending tanks into a battle that the Russians are obviously going to win, and you're just going to annoy the Russians and get yourself in trouble.
Right.
And,
so by this way of
looking
at it, the stakes have grown, and by attacking Ukraine, Russia's recklessly threatened the West's strategic interests and is now suffering the consequences. And that's why it's going to shift more and more to NATO helping Ukraine. End of segment, end of time. Right. And that's my story, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay. Well, that works. It fits.
Where's the music? I'm listening for the music. Where's the music?
4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do it. All right, there it is.
All right,
that's the music.
Here's the music.
It comes in at 30 seconds. So, if you I think all our clocks are synced, right? You got your computer clock, unless you set it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I
you're
don't set it. Whoever sets these things set it.
Gods of Apple, tell me what.
But I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay, very good. And we know when Wednesday is coming because the calendar is a fixed thing, and it never changes, and there's no variance, and everybody uses the same one.
I demand we have a vote on it.
Why not? All right. See you then. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to tell you, something has just crossed the desk here that is via Mastodon, via Molly Jong Fast at Mastodon, who just comments, this is kind of wild. And it's like, oh, come on. Are you kidding me? So pictures from the situation down in Brazil apparently include a Brazilian QAnon shaman. Like, you remember our guy, the guy who painted his face red, white, and blue and wore a big Water Buffalo Lodge hat and no shirt, and he came around with a bullhorn screaming nonsense and et cetera, et cetera. And he was the photographic face of the uprising because it was just that stupid looking. Now, it turns out that there's photos of a guy down in Brazil who has his face painted green, white, and I assume that's maybe gold as opposed to yellow. I don't know. But the colors of the Brazilian flag, except this time he has appropriated what is, I guess, most analogous to American Indian headdress, the Plains Indian chieftain type long headdress with 100 eagle feathers in it, right? But he's added some horns to it so that it looks even more like that. And he's added some I don't know what. These are like little stuffed animal leopard tails dangling at the sides because the QAnon shaman's Water Buffalo Lodge hat had like what looked like raccoon tails hanging from it. So it's obviously a direct copy, and he's shirtless as well, body paint and yada yada, and it's about as direct a lift from the American insurrection as you could possibly have. And it's just like, you should come up with your own ideas, and B, nothing could make it clearer that there's a relationship between the two insurrections than this. Well, I suppose other than the fact that the same people were behind organizing them. Everything I'm seeing, and I haven't read exactly why it is that people are saying this, but everybody is saying that Stephen Bannon and the other one, Stephen Miller, were both, I guess, involved in and consulting with Bolsonaro's supporters in preparation for this insurrection in Brazil. And hey, if the Brazilian authorities would like to swoop in, arrest them, and extradite them to Brazil for, fine mincing or pressing into the pavement of a new overpass or anything like that, any use as mulch, I'll even help. I'll pitch in to rent the wood chipper if you want. Take them. They're yours. I know we have rule of law and there's good reason not to allow that sort of thing, but I'm busy and I'm planning on looking the other way when that happens. So you might want to take advantage of it. All right. Well, I'll write myself a special dispensation in the rules to allow this sort of thing. That brings me back around to the fact that, yes, there are, in fact, rules proposed by the Republicans that they want to bring to the floor today. I'm not certain in what order they have decided to do it, though Greg reports that they were interested in installing the members of the committees first, and I guess squaring away some of those committee chairmanships, though that's not always necessarily done in those resolutions. But I guess that's a high priority, getting the committees set. They can opt to adopt the rules first and then the other stuff. There's also a number of housekeeping resolutions that they have to take care of, like they're supposed to notify the Senate and the president that they've elected a speaker and have now begun organizing the House. So they'll take care of all of those things, and it doesn't necessarily matter that much what order they do them in. But the rules package that they've got written up was released Friday night, I think, and I've seen it. It's on the Rules Committee website, which is rules.house.gov, and you can go there and follow the prompts and find it. And they have a link to a PDF of the rules package, which at the moment has no number, HRES blank, and I guess it'll be, if they really want to do it first, it'll be HRES 1, I suppose. Although I think what they'll do is they'll probably make HRES 1 the notice to the Senate and or president that they've organized and have elected a speaker and that it's Kevin McCarthy. And occasionally they have, 2 or 3 more that they have to do. So the rules package usually ends up being, HRES 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. Something in the neighborhood between 5 and 8. It doesn't really matter, but I was on the subject, so I thought I'd say, well, here it is. It's rather lengthy. It's 55 pages, which is, I think, probably a little bulkier than most rules packages, even though there's the full rule book is pretty bulky itself. But remember, this is just, we're going to accept the previous rules that existed from the previous House that are written down somewhere. They no longer, are in force, but we're going to readopt those plus the following changes. So it's really just the changes. They have 55 pages of changes they'd like to make. And as I said, some are oddly specific. So to give you a sense of what a resolution like this sounds like, it begins this way. A resolution adopting the rules of the House of Representatives for the 118th Congress and for other purposes, which is standard boilerplate language. But remember that one of the things that they want to do is to make it that it's not for other purposes. But right now it is. Anyway, so resolved. And then these are the things that they say. Section 1, adoption of the rules of the 117th Congress, which is just what I told you. They're going to say all the rules that used to exist plus these changes. The rules of the House of Representatives of the 117th Congress, the Pelosi one, including applicable provisions of law or concurrent resolution that constituted the rules of the House at the end of the 117th Congress, are adopted as the rules of the House of Representatives of the 118th Congress, with amendments to the standing rules as provided in Section 2, and with other orders as provided in this resolution. So what's in Section 2? Changes to the standing rules. We'll have to race through them if we want to get to all of them. We don't really necessarily. But here's the sorts of things they have on mind. Initiatives to reduce spending and improve accountability. You remember the old pay-as-you-go rule? They're now going to have something they are going to call the cut-as-you-go rule. In Rule 21, and this is interesting, I'm just going to read this to you, not because we'll be able to figure out what it means off the top of our head, but to give you a sense of the language in which rules are written and why it's not always entirely clear what they're doing and why things appear like they're hidden, or people say they're hidden in the rules package. They're not hidden. They're in writing, but they're in writing in ways that you can only understand if you have all the context or are willing to read the whole, manual and read the previous rules. So very often, like for instance, I guess the best example of this maybe what I'll do is I'll stick with what I was going to say. This is the sort of dry language in which this stuff is written. So they're going to have this new cut as you go rule. Did they tell you what it is? No. They tell you this. In Rule 21, and remember that's in Roman numerals, in Rule XXI, amend Clause 10 to read as follows. So right away you're like, what's Rule 21? Specifically, what does Clause 10 now say? Well, you could go and you could take a look. And it's easy enough to find if you stop what you're doing and go Google it and read what is it used to say and what's it going to say now. So now it's going to say 10A1, except as provided in paragraphs B and C. It shall not be in order to consider a bill or a joint resolution or an amendment thereto or a conference report thereon if the provisions of such measure have the net effect of increasing mandatory spending for the period of either A, the current year, the budget year, and the 4 fiscal years following that budget year, or B, the current year, the budget year, and the 9 fiscal years following that budget year. Why 4 and 9? Because 4 plus the current year equals 5. That's the budget window that the House uses. The current year, 1 plus 9 fiscal years, that's 10. That's the 10-year window that the Senate uses. That's why those numbers. Now, Section 2 of Cut As You Go. For purposes of this clause, the term budget year and current year have the meaning specified in Section 250 of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985. Go look that up. Find out what does that mean. Section 250. What are the definitions of budget year and current year? Just to figure out what they're talking about. This is the work you have to do. And the term mandatory spending has the meaning of direct spending as specified in such Section 250, except that such term shall also include the provisions of the Appropriations Acts that year make out-year modifications to substantive law as described in Section 3, parentheses 4, parentheses C, of the Statutory Pay-As-You-Go Act of 2010. So you see what happens is it's really it's a long list of references to already existing provisions and saying strike the comma and insert but and stuff like that. That's all there is to it. But it's impossible to decipher unless you look up each of these things and make a copy of each of these pages and put them all up side by side and highlight the part they're talking about. And then the picture begins to emerge. So, for instance, like I said, maybe I'll give you a better example of it. The big thing that everybody heard them fighting about was the motion to vacate the chair, right? To declare the speakership vacant. And we heard all about it. And it's going to be 1 member, and it's going to be 5 members, and you got to have a vote, and it means this, and it means you can disrupt things forever. Well, okay. So the bottom line, in terms of what to worry about with the speakership vacating the speakership, and they also pointed fingers and they said, well, Pelosi is the one that changed it so that it couldn't be brought by just 1 member. So, you made the change, and it used to be just 1 member, and we just want to put it back the way it is, but you corrupt Democrats are the ones that changed it. So as for the history of it, yes, 1 member could always propose that, but you could always, and it's still the case. Although, yeah, right. In the 117th Congress, they said this. They said, I'll tell you what, it can still be 1 member that would propose vacating the chair, but let's make it such that it either has to be the majority leader or minority leader. In other words, they have to have the support of one of the parties lined up behind them. You can't just come to the floor and waste everybody's time with a vote that isn't going to go anywhere because you're the only one angry at the speaker. You got to be, 1, speaking for a party and willing to put the reputation of the whole party on the line if you want to interrupt things with a vote to vacate the speakership. And 2, you have to have some chance of actually winning. It's a proxy. All it is, it was this rule as the Pelosi 117th Congress defined it, was a proxy for support. You know, that there is a significant number of people who actually support this, and I've talked to them already, as opposed to I was just winging it. The speaker called me a jerk, and I made a motion to vacate the chair. That, you know, it wouldn't work like that under the old rule. Under the new rule, of course, it will. And it is true that they're restoring the way the rule used to be. But then again, you know, the rule used to be that you would have been embarrassed to be the one person moving to vacate the chair because the chair personally insulted you. It would be embarrassing, and you would never do it because you would know that it would go down to ignominious defeat. And still in the rule, the rules still contemplate the same end for something like this. So even if some jackass, Lauren Boebert, decides to make a motion to vacate the chair, the immediate thing is somebody who supports McCarthy immediately rises. They say, for what purpose does this white guy arise? And he'll say, I move to table the motion. And they say, the motion is on the, or the question is on the motion to table the motion of the gentlelady from Colorado to vacate the chair. And they have a vote, and everybody votes to table the motion. And then everybody leaves, and that's all there is to it. And you can still do that, and you could have done that whether it was 5 members or 1 member or a majority leader, minority leader, or just anybody from the back bench. Really, all that the rules change that Pelosi and the Democrats in the 117th Congress made was they said, instead of wasting our time with a loser motion to vacate the chair that will lose every time because you're in the minority, and the majority will simply vote to preserve their speaker. And then I know that that's in question with Republicans, but when it wasn't in question with the Democrats, they just said, look, if you want to continue to waste our time, they're going to have to be with motions to adjourn instead. Anyway, so, it wasn't such a big deal. Now, scrolling down, it took a while. I should have written down where is the part about the vacating the chair. But what's interesting is that was the major fight, and it's the smallest part with the fewest words, basically. It's just this tiny thing that they inserted into the rules package, and if you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd overlook it. And here it is. And I just did overlook it accidentally. It's on page 14. So what are we in here? We're in section 2. I mean, just by way of using the organization of the thing, right? We're in section 1 was, this is what we're, keep the old rules. Section 2 is, here's the changes. We're now in, section 2A, initiatives to reduce spending. Section 2, there's another one. We're still in section 2A. There's a requiring a vote on raising the debt. Right. So even if Democrats had tried to get rid of the debt ceiling, they would attempt to reinstate it in their rules. Let's see. B, increased threshold for tax rate increases. Now I'm having to read my way through all of this, but you'll see what else is in here. So by way of making my way around to the speakership vacating motion, I note for the record that they are going to essentially, they'll bring us a fun filibuster in the House from now on in order to, not from now on, but during the 118th Congress, while Republicans are in control of it anyway, and that may change midstream, in order to to pass an increase in the federal income tax rate, will now require a 3/5 vote. They love the 3/5 compromise there in the Republican Party. And that's, of course, many things, but among them is it's the threshold that you need to break a filibuster with cloture in the Senate. So now the House will have the ability to filibuster, essentially, an increase in the income tax rate. Of course, it's not really a filibuster, and it ends at the end of debate, et cetera, et cetera. But the voting threshold is the same. So there's more, and yada, yada, yada. And when you get down to page 14, I guess I'll have to skip exactly how they organize and outline. But back down on page 14, for all the fighting and all the concentration that there was on this thing, all there is, verbiage-wise, is here in paragraph Q. of this long list of rules changes. Let's see, what are we in here? I am curious, where do the letters begin? I'm scrolling back up. D, G, D, C, B, A. All right. Estimates of major legislation. They included this under a CBO thing. So it doesn't even have its own freestanding provision, this most important of holdout provisions, right? And all it says is resolution declaring the office of Speaker vacant. Does it explain the process? Does it explain how many people will have to do it? No. It's the most surgical possible, least verbose way of changing things. All that's happening in this whole rules package is the following, I don't know, less than 10 words. I'll count them. In clause 2A, we'll call that one word, of Rule 9, strike subparagraph 3, period. That's 9 words. That's the whole fight about those. There's 9 words in the 55 pages. In clause 2A of Rule 9, strike subparagraph 3. Boo-hoo. Can you imagine having a big fight over this? Well, you can if you read Rule 9, specifically clause 2A, subparagraph 3. What is that one? What it comes down to is that's the rule that got added in the 117th Congress that says that you can only offer a motion, a resolution declaring the office of the Speaker vacant if you are doing it on behalf of one of the two political parties, that you've talked it out with the members of your party, majority or some significant number of them back it. They say it's actually something that we want to allow you to spend your time on. Go for it. Offer it in the name of the Republican Party. Offer it in the name of the Democratic Party. Go ahead and do it. Okay, we'll get rid of that. And now that means that it reverts to the mean. It reverts to where it was before anyway, and the status quo ante, I guess. And anyone can offer it. Of course, anyone can also table it too. So now, it's not really a big problem, except that there's a larger number of people who really are shameless and won't care about wasting everybody's time by bringing an automatic loser of a resolution to the floor. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to debate it when they bring it to the floor. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll be recognized for that purpose. That's another thing you can do if you're holding the gavel. And for what purpose does the gentlelady from Colorado rise? I rise for the purpose of offering a privileged resolution. It would be privileged, declaring the office of the Speaker vacant. But if this person holding the gavel says the gentlelady is not recognized for that purpose, there'd be a big fight. Briefly, what do you mean I'm not recognized for that purpose? It means you're not recognized for that purpose. But I should be recognized. It's a privileged resolution. Well, that may be. Find out if the House agrees with you. Well, I appeal the ruling of the chair. All right, let's have a vote. And if a majority of the House says, actually, we don't want to recognize the gentlelady for that purpose at this time. It was a privileged resolution, but guess what? A majority of the House said, we don't want to hear from you. You got to line up your ducks in a row before you make a move like this. So they'll very quickly find out that it doesn't really work the way they imagined, but, they'll have to go through that exercise. Or maybe someone will explain it to them and they'll waste their time on something else. So there's other stuff in here. Section 3 is the separate orders that were mentioned all the way back up at the top. Remember, Section 1 said all the rules of the 117th Congress, we're going to readopt all of those with the following changes as outlined in Section 2. Section 2 outlined the changes. Now, then they said also we're going to have separate orders in Section 3. Extra stuff that isn't really supposed to be written into the standing rules, but will be in effect as if it was. For instance, the first, and I guess also note for the record that the very last thing included in the changes to prior rules, the very last thing, paragraph Q here, is that big fight over the speakership, vacating the speakership. They just put it at the end. So Section 3, separate orders. Here's the Holman rule that Greg had mentioned for the past couple of weeks. During the 118th Congress, any reference in Clause 2 of Rule 21, Again, you got to go look it up. To a provision or amendment that retrenches expenditures by a reduction of amounts of money covered by the bill shall be construed as applying to any provision or amendment offered after the bill has been read for amendment that retrenches expenditures by... And what do we say about something like that when you read stuff like this?
Boring!
Yeah, exactly. And you tune out. And even before you get to, well, retrenching expenditures by 1, reduction of amounts of money in the bill, 2, reduction of the number and salary of the officers of the United States, or 3, the reduction of the compensation of any person paid out of the Treasury of the United States. You know, it is very boring, but it does reinstate the Holman Rule, which isn't a matter of simply amending old rules, but an interpretation of the existing Clause 2 of the existing Rule 21. Next up, restoring legislative branch accountability is the highfalutin language for this next part. What are they going to do? The regulations adopted pursuant to House Resolution 1096 of the 117th Congress, go look it up, shall have no force or effect during the 118th Congress. What does that mean? Do you want to look up one of these things while we're doing it? It's not always all that easy, but if you go to congress.gov, you can look these things up usually pretty quickly if you have a bill number. So they are what? Repealing the effect of House Resolution 1096. Let's go see if we can find it. House H-Res 1096. See if it brings it up for the 117th Congress pretty quickly. Or not, and that's not always the case. Lots of discussion of it in the, there we go. House Resolution 1096, 117th Congress, approving certain regulations to implement provisions of the Congressional Accountability Act of 1995 relating to labor management relations with respect to employees of the House of Representatives covered under Section 220 E of the Act and for other purposes, which I guess means that the House Resolution 1096 in the last Congress allowed, I think, unionization of congressional staff. And that is now being repealed according to the new rules package. And I think that made it into the newspaper summations of what was happening, but here is the dry legislative language with what it's done. It doesn't say the House Republicans hereby resolve to erase the right of collective bargaining for our House congressional staff and therefore repeal House Resolution 1096. Instead, they just do it the dry way. They don't actually state their intention. They just say, it's hereby declared that the regulations adopted pursuant to House Resolution 1096 in the 117th Congress have no force or effect in the 118th Congress. But never tell you what they are. It's this way that they write these things. So what else? Requirement with respect to single subject bills. This is interesting, right? They say that basically they want to have just single subject bills going forward. This despite the fact that this rule for single subject bills is included in this one not bill, but resolution that has 18,000 different subjects. But never mind all of that. It doesn't apply for us right now. Now, we're getting up against the break here, so I'm going to keep scrolling down. There's other things, some of which are more important than others, but down at the bottom of this list of other special orders is, as I said, a list of particular bills, and in many cases they've included the bill number. They've already numbered these things. And say that they're just going to be made in order and not have separate rules votes necessarily on them. That it may be the case that they say, all right, well, it will be in order to consider this, but we'll still have a special rule hearing and a resolution written defining how long we will debate and what amendments, if any, are going to be allowed. But they clear the decks and say that at any point after a certain date, it will be in order to consider these bills. And what we'll do is we'll run down the list of which bills they are just to give you a sampling of them, because they are either leadership priorities, which is why they would be included in here, or more likely, because they don't really have to do this for leadership priorities, they are the horses for which individual voters eventually voting for McCarthy traded in order to get there. For an individual backbencher in particular, to get a guarantee of the consideration of their bill is a pretty remarkable thing. Very few bills compared to how many get introduced actually make it to the floor. So this is a special, quick pass-go, collect $200 tip of the hat to these people. We'll read it to you next. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with a tour through what's in the rules. I was scrolling down to where I wanted to get to, but I stopped here for another paragraph that got inserted here under the special orders in paragraph O on page 28. This jumps out. It always jumps out whenever they mention the War Powers Resolution. But not entirely sure what this one is about, but I have a pretty good guess, or I have a guess, and you tell me whether it's pretty good or not. During the 118th Congress, what the unusual part is at the end. A motion to discharge a measure introduced pursuant to Section 6 or Section 7 of the War Powers Resolution, and it's cited here as 50 U.S. Code Sections 15, 45, and 46. Well, a motion to discharge a measure pursuant to Section 6 or 7 of the War Powers Resolution shall not be subject to a motion to table. I thought that was pretty interesting because I was talking about what would happen with the motion to vacate the speakership and how somebody would just say, well, I move to table this motion. And somebody said, well, maybe they can make it against the rules to table that motion. I said, that would be pretty unusual. I guess they could try to do that, but it's pretty basic to parliamentary procedure, the motion to table. We'll have to look and see. And they didn't insert anything that says you can't move to table a motion to vacate the chair. They could have asked for that, but they didn't know. They didn't know well enough to do that, or they didn't care. But here is, in fact, a explicit prohibition against a motion to table any, not the motion to invoke Section 6 or 7 of the War Powers Resolution, but the motion to discharge it from committee. There's an extra layer involved in that here. So, my guess is that this is perhaps about bringing some sort of War Powers Resolution to try to limit President Biden's authority to perhaps to aid in Ukraine, maybe. Ordinarily, the War Powers Resolution gets invoked when you're talking about deploying troops somewhere, and I don't think anybody's talking about deploying troops to Ukraine. But if that were in the offing, you might find opponents in the House. You might find them in both parties, really, who want to bring a War Powers Resolution at some point and say, okay, the time is up. The president's ability to deploy troops to Ukraine is time limited under the War Powers Resolution. We want to invoke the War Powers Resolution and force the withdrawal of those troops unless there's explicit congressional authority granted. Doesn't look like there's going to be explicit authority granted, because Republicans are in charge and, might not be the bad decision in that case anyway. But what might happen, though, is people who are more hawkish militarily, who are generally in charge of things, procedure, including procedure on the House floor, might say, well, the House Armed Services Committee has been sent this resolution. You submitted it asking for a withdrawal of the troops under the War Powers Resolution. We referred your resolution to the Armed Services Committee. The Armed Services Committee has been considering it. They're dragging their feet. They never intend to report it out. Maybe they won't even have a hearing on it. So you move to discharge the Armed Services Committee from any further consideration of the resolution, so you can bring it to the floor directly and have a vote. No more bottling it up in the Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers or whatever. And if you have a discharge petition, that's one thing. Of course, that's where you circulate a petition. If you get a majority of members, if 218 members sign a discharge petition, there's a whole procedure, and it's a whole rigmarole, and it takes quite a while to get the thing to the floor, but eventually it does. Or you can make a motion to discharge the committee without going through the petitioning process. And same thing, though. You still have to get a majority of members to vote for it. 218 if everybody's there. But a little easier than the petition and a little faster. But if you move to discharge the committee, very often the committee chair or some ally of his will come and say, well, I move to table the motion to discharge this resolution from the Armed Services Committee. And they have that vote, and they very often will win that vote. And, therefore, you don't even get to a vote on whether or not to discharge this resolution. And that's very frustrating to people who are trying to invoke the War Powers Resolution. And so here they've actually, I guess, have run into that in the past, and they've written a prohibition against a motion to table the motion to discharge the War Powers Resolution materials, as long as you're pursuing it subject to Section 6 or 7, which, I guess War Powers Resolution experts will tell you exactly what they can do. But I'm wondering whether that's about protecting their right to either make trouble or, perhaps even possibly do the right thing by preventing deployment of troops directly in Ukraine. All right. Well, at any rate, that's the speculation. Could apply to anywhere. It's not limited to Ukraine. There are more various provisions here, but I wanted to get down to the special dispensation for individual bills here. And there's still quite a lot in here, and I guess as we scroll by, I'm screening these things to see if anything weird or odd stands out here. No, so far, there's a lot in here that actually makes a considerable amount of sense about making machine-readable texts of the bills available quicker, and opening up the archives of stored materials at the various committees. Oh, by the way, somewhere in here is, in addition to all the special bills that they're giving passes to, there are, of course, the investigative committees and subcommittees and select committees, et cetera, they're establishing. As you know, they're going to get they're threatening to put together a select committee to investigate Hunter Biden all by himself. A select committee, of course, to investigate the select committee that investigated them for the January 6th insurrection. That's certainly in the offing. A number of other things, too. Just various investigative subcommittees that they are authorizing, including a select subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, and they didn't come up with a better name for it than that. So they're going to go ahead and actually make a committee called that, the Weaponization of the Federal Government Subcommittee. That's kind of embarrassing. This is of some consequence, but you had to figure that they were going to do it at some point. Transfer of certain committee records to the Committee on House Administration. Well, sounds benign, but see if you can guess what committee records they're transferring. This won't tell you unless you read the manual. any committee designated by the Speaker pursuant to Section 7B1 of House Resolution 503 of the 117th Congress. And I mean, there's like thousands, right? Thousands of committees designated by the Speaker pursuant to Section 7B1 of House Resolution 503. Wink, wink. Well, any committee, irrespective of what it might be investigating, that happens to meet this criteria, and I'm not saying it has to be this one committee, it's open to any committee designated by the Speaker pursuant to Section 7B1 of Resolution 503, well, they are now directed to transfer any records obtained pursuant to such designation, 7B1 of House Resolution 503, send it all to the Committee on House Administration not later than January 17th, 2023. Well, it's January 9th. So they better get to it. What is House Resolution 503? Specifically, what does Section 7B1 of House Resolution 503 say? You probably already guessed. House Resolution 503 was the resolution establishing the Select Committee for the investigation of the attack on the Capitol of January 6, 2021. All their records now have to be sent to the House Administration Committee. And I don't even remember who's on the House Administration Committee or which wingnut is in charge there, but we'll go and take a look. House Administration Committee. And so now that you'll get the name of, they may not have named their chair yet, but we'll look at who the ranking member was last time, and that will let us know. And as I recall, they were sort of hiding the ball here. Rodney Davis. That's it. So Committee on House Administration, at that point, ranking member Rodney Davis, presumably now will take the gavel, but I don't know. Maybe they made a deal not to, but I think he's very likely to get it. And he was pretty unfriendly to the whole investigation. And I think he was trying to get on to the committee. He was one of the people that was supposed to be nominated to the committee that, I don't know if it was one of the people that was specifically excluded by Speaker Pelosi, like Jim Jordan was. But anyway, so now Rodney Davis, for whatever you may know or about Rodney Davis, is going to come into possession of all of the records created by the January 6th committee. Now, we've seen most of them, so he can't hide most of that from view. But I guess anything that hasn't been disclosed yet, they got, doesn't say they can't make copies and keep it and disclose it later, but some copy of it anyway has to be delivered to the Committee on House Administration by January 17th. The archivist, further, is directed to transfer any non-current records of a committee designated by the Speaker, anyone that happens to have been designated by the Speaker pursuant to 7B1 of House Resolution 503 of the 117th Congress, and related to the Select Committee established pursuant to such resolution, wink, wink, which have been archived pursuant to Rule 7 of the Committee on House Administration. That all has to go on the same date, not later than January 17th. Any records transferred or withdrawn pursuant to this subsection shall become the records of the Committee on House Administration. So there you go. There's that as well. Moving on and continuing to scroll down. We're getting near the end here. So I think just as usual, there's the benign inclusion of the old rule, the version of it this year that says in the 118th Congress, the first 10 numbers for bills, H.R. 1 through H.R. 10, shall be reserved for assignment by the Speaker. And the second 10 numbers for bills, H.R. 11 through H.R. 20, shall be reserved for assignment by the minority leader. So once again, those low-numbered bills are going to be special priority bills of each of the parties. It's just that H.R. 11 through H.R. 20 will probably never see the light of day. Unless, of course, enough members of the Republican Party die or are arrested or indicted or otherwise removed from office or expelled, are killed making bombs in their basements, whatever it is that takes them out, and the majority changes hands. But at any rate, that probably won't happen, so don't worry about it. All right, now, committees, commissions, and House offices. Here comes the new investigative committees. First up in Section 4, a select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic. Now, there already was one, but this is the one that's going to investigate why Dr. Fauci killed everybody. is what, from their point of view, what they're going to do. The select subcommittee shall be comprised of not more than 12 members, and here they'll allow delegates and resident commissioner to serve. They'll be appointed by not more than 12 of the members. I'm sorry. I guess there'll be more of that than that. There's 17 members coming. So it's expressed this way. 12 will be appointed by the speaker, of whom not more than 5 shall be appointed in consultation with the minority leader. The speaker shall designate one member of the select subcommittee as its chair. Any vacancies, But that's interesting too, is it doesn't say that the membership will be set by a resolution where there's going to be a House floor vote. It's direct appointment by the speaker. Remember, this whole fight was about taking power out of the speaker's hands, but not this power, apparently. That one they feel comfortable putting in his hands. Let's see. There's also an here's some description of their investigative authority, but assume that anything that they do can and should lead to the arrest of Anthony Fauci is what this is all about. Let's see. They changed the name of the old Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. I think they changed this to the House Democracy Partnership because they're tired of honoring a Democrat named Tom Lantos, who was very interested in this. And instead, so they also, by the way, they changed the name of the House Education and Labor Committee to get labor out of it. I think it might be Education and the Workforce. They still have the same jurisdiction. They just don't like saying the word labor, apparently. All right. Some tinkering with the Office of Congressional Ethics and their investigative powers. Here we are. So Section 5, Orders of Business. This is where we get to the special rules and clearing the decks for consideration of different bills. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 21. So they're basically saying if you adopt this rules package, at any time after you adopt the rules package, the Speaker can, at the drop of the hat, to declare the House in the Committee of the Whole for considering H.R. 21 to provide for the development of a plan to increase oil and gas production under oil and gas leases of federal lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of the Interior, and the Secretary of Defense, in conjunction with a drawdown of petroleum reserves from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the majority leader and the minority leader or their respective designees. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions of the bill are waived. No amendment shall be in order except 1. Those amendments to the bill received for printing in the portion of the congressional record designated for that purpose in Clause 8 of Rule 18, dated at least 1 day before the day of consideration of the amendment, and 2. Up to 20 pro forma amendments for the purposes of debate, 10 of which will be offered by the majority leader or a designee, and 10 of which may be offered by the minority leader or a designee. Each amendment so received may be offered only by the member who caused it to be printed. You get the idea? This is basically what you would ordinarily debate in the Rules Committee the day before you are getting set to consider this bill about allowing more oil and gas drilling on federal lands and a drawdown from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They're aiming this at, 6 months later, we're going to do something about gas prices because something Biden, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, gas prices are kind of resolving themselves, and their view of taking care of gas prices is we'll drill for oil or natural gas on federal land, except, well, generally speaking, the natural gas that they extract won't do anything about gasoline prices. And for the most part, neither will any oil that's drilled from the federal lands be converted into gasoline either. Instead, it tends to be the type of oil that gets barreled up and exported to China for different purposes. But anyway, that's what they say they're going to do. And Oddly, they have the floor debate right in the House rules package that they're going to have a 1 hour debate on it and how it'll be divided. The 5-minute rule, by the way, is the one that allows any member to stand up and offer a pro forma amendment. They're limiting it to 10 here for some reason. But this is their version of open rules. Ordinarily, when they say they want to bring something to the floor under open rules, it means that it's debatable for as long as you want to debate it and as long as people want to keep offering amendments. And the thing that you do is you offer a pro forma amendment that purportedly strikes the requisite number of words, as they say, from the bill text, thereby changing it, thereby entitling you to 5 minutes to discuss what you want to discuss, even if you don't actually have a real amendment to make. But even when they have open rules, they don't have open rules. There'll be 10 pro forma amendments allowed by the majority, 10 for the minority, instead of however many you want to bring. So even their open rules are closed. Plus, of course, you can't just, the most open of rules is the one where you can amend things on the fly and say, well, why don't we change it from 6 to 7 right there on the floor? They hate that. They want you at least to print it ahead of time. And, that's not really awful either. It's not that restrictive, but it isn't an open rule. What else have they got? Let's see. The bills referred to in subsection B are as follows. There's more that are authorized. H.R. 23, to rescind certain balances made available to the Internal Revenue Service. What are those certain balances? That would probably be all of the money that is designated for the Internal Revenue Service. This is a defund the IRS bill, H.R. 23, and that too is cleared for action. Although they don't have the length of debate dictated in the rules package. What else? H.R. 29, to authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to suspend the entry of aliens, and for other purposes, even though you're only supposed to have single-purpose bills. What are those purposes? We'll find out later, but how do you like that? So we're going to authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to suspend the entry of aliens. All of them. It's now going to be illegal to enter this country. But, of course, all they're really asking is, well, this bill will authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to do that. Will the Homeland Secretary under the Biden administration say yes to that? No, they won't. But they'll be authorized to if H.R. 29 passes the House, passes the Senate, gets signed by the president or not signed, and after 10 days, etc., yada, yada, yada. But that's what they wanted to put that out there for. Somebody held out. I'm not going to vote for McCarthy unless you allow me to allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to do something he's not going to do. What else? H.R. 22, to prohibit the Secretary of Energy from sending petroleum products from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China and for other purposes. And that's not a terrible idea. Why would we send our Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China? Maybe we're actually doing it. There could be a reason for it, or it could, just as easily with these Republicans, it could be an imagined nightmare that they say, well, what if Biden were to do that? I need to prohibit that. Well, you could look it up and find out. H.R. 27, also mentioned here, to amend the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act to direct district attorney and prosecutors' offices to report to the Attorney General and for other purposes. Report what? I don't know. We could look it up. But again, all these things are obfuscating what they don't simply say. They could say in the section title to do this thing and then use the technical language, but they love to hide the ball and use just the technical language. What else? H.R. 28, to require the National Instant Criminal Background Check System to notify U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the relevant state and local law enforcement agencies whenever the information available to the system indicates that a person illegally or unlawfully in the United States may be attempting to receive a firearm. It is interesting. We don't want people who are illegally or unlawfully in the United States to receive a firearm, I guess. Well, some of us don't want anybody to receive a firearm, but it's interesting just because Second Amendment purists are usually, anybody should be able to obtain a firearm, even if you are in the country illegally. So maybe this represents progress. I don't know. Next up, the bill H.R. 7, to prohibit taxpayer-funded abortions, which are happening all the time, right? But okay, they want to bring H.R. 7. It's one of those top 10 bills that they set aside. This is a leadership priority, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's Kevin McCarthy's priority, but it might be. But, there's going to find a lot of agreement on that. What else? H.R. 26, to amend Title 18 U.S. Code to prohibit healthcare practitioners from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child, real or imagined, who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. Okay, that's happening left and right. We really got to get on that one. H.R. 26. Make it, prohibit make it illegal for a healthcare practitioner to fail to exercise the proper degree of care, whatever that might be, in the case of a child who survives an abortion. Because, of course, Republicans believe that, everybody is getting abortions, on the due date. And B, that if they accidentally give birth instead of succeed in having an abortion on their due date, Democrats are eating the babies, and we have to prevent that from happening. So, all right. At least we're up to speed on getting that taken care of. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order to consider in the House any resolution specified in subsection E. There's another list of them. Those resolutions will be considered as read. These are resolutions, not bills. The previous question shall be considered as ordered. In other words, everything gets out of the way. They'll be debatable by 1 hour, for 1 hour, divided by between majority and minority leaders. These resolutions are as follows. Resolution 11, H-Res 11, establishing the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to have a select committee investigating the Chinese Communist Party. We kind of know about them and what they're doing, but okay. We'll have that. There's another resolution that they haven't numbered yet, which will establish a select committee on the weaponization of the federal government as a select investigative subcommittee of the Committee on the Judiciary, which means, of course, that that'll be under the control of Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan. That was one of the recent additions. You can tell by the fact that they don't actually have a written resolution or numbered resolution on it yet, but that got shoehorned in at the end. Let's see. Then there's the next section that says, after the adoption of the rules, it will be in order to consider the following House concurrent resolutions. And this is just one of those. H-Con Res 4, expressing support for the nation's law enforcement agencies. Yes, sir. I'm saluting over here. And condemning any efforts to defund or dismantle law enforcement agencies, except the IRS and the FBI, which we're going to defund. But they're going to cover their asses with H-Con Res 4, addressing the extreme problem of the imminent defunding of all police departments in the country by radical woke forces, which they will address with a resolution that doesn't do anything, but expresses the intent or the support of the House for not doing that, except the ones that they do. All right, so that's it for the special bills and resolutions and considerations. And then, of course, Section H here. The Speaker may recognize a member for the reading of the Constitution on any legislative day through February 28th, 2023. Remember that on day one of the new Congress, we are going to read the entirety of the Constitution. Well, as it turns out, we'll read it, but it could be on day 25 or possibly 80 because, I don't know, any day before February 28th, end of February 2023. Might not be day 1, might not be day 2, might not be day 10, might not be day 15, but it will happen. Eventually, we'll get around to reading that Constitution. And won't that be a treat? So there you go. That's all the stupid hidden provisions. There's other equally stupid things in there, I guess, that are even drier than that. But I just thought it was interesting. I don't think I've ever seen it before, but I haven't looked for it. I can't promise you, once again, that Democrats never put the rules for consideration for some of their legislative priorities into the rules package to save time or, map out how they're going to spend the first 10 days or something like that. I think it's entirely possible that they may have done it. Probably, I would bet this. If they had done it in the past, and you brought me examples of it, my guess would be that it is clearing the decks for major legislative priorities on substantive legislation, as opposed to a sense of the House resolution that we're against defunding things, or that we are going to, or this or that about abortion, or prohibiting federal funding for abortion. It's usually something much bigger, much more substantive. But usually they're still developing those things in committee, so I think it's a fairly rare thing. Anyway, we'll come back to this tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Tuesday. We'll see if we can get Joan McCarter in to join us, if the chaos is settled enough in the House, such that chaos that results from covering the chaos in the House on the front page of Daily Kos permits her to spend some time with us. We'll probably talk a little bit about that. Maybe we'll know a little bit more about what's going on in Brazil. I would recommend to you a number of sources, including, by the way, the fun writing that takes place over at the Payday Report, when Mike Elk, who spent some time down in Brazil covering their initial election, feels a personal connection to that, and he's been emailing his Payday Report with some really interesting and exciting updates about Brazil. I recommend them to you.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, remember, I guess we're still waiting on the new laptop there for Justice Putnam, so that he can bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy live again fairly soon. I think delivery date on that, though, was the 16th. So I know he is prepared. I believe he's prepared shows ahead of time today. Maybe he'll have something on Brazil, but it might have caught us all by surprise. We'll get to it by the end of the week, I promise.